Executive Director for Interfaith Works, and welcome to Lean in Olympia. Lean in Olympia is a live bi-weekly show that airs on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, and we feature conversations that are at the crossroads of humanity, justice, belief, current events that are happening in our community. And we are really happy to have an awesome guest today who we're going to meet in just a second. If you want to check out any past episodes, please stay up to date with the work that Interfaith Works is doing in the community. You can do that at our website, interfaith-works.org, or check out the Interfaith Works Facebook page and YouTube page. So today I'm super excited. We have an awesome guest here today, Port Commissioner and all-around amazing community member, Amy Evans. Amy and I first met when we were working on the One Plan for Olympia community work group process to put together, how would you describe it? It was like...
I always say community solutions to address what's occurring with houseless individuals as well as the impact on the community in creating solutions.
Yeah, and it brought together people from various different parts of the community who frankly didn't always see eye to eye on the situation, and it was a really, I think, eye-opening experience for both of us to learn about other perspectives. And now you ran for Port Commissioner, and I guess I'm just wondering if you could start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I just loved working with Meg. I think before I got on the work group, I had heard about this Meg Martin person, and it was this mystery. And then working with Meg, I think it actually really is a good example of what I believe in as far as politics and being at the port, of just working with a diversity of ideas. So just to follow up on that. But myself, I moved to Olympia in 4th grade.
Really? I didn't know that was that early.
Yeah.
Cool.
I went to LP Brown, Jefferson, Capitol, and then I went to Montana. I went to undergrad, and then I went to law school there. And I call myself a recovered lawyer. And I just told Meg I'm getting married this year.
Yes.
So,
So exciting.
Yep, 42 years I've made it. So, but yeah, I like to travel. That really informs my perspective. Traveling to places where people don't have the same opportunities we have here, and it motivates me. So that's a really big part of my life. I'm not going to Hawaii, nothing wrong with Hawaii, but I have had the privilege of going to Ethiopia and Albania and Cambodia, places where they've experienced a lot of political unrest. So, yeah.
You've also been super involved with something that was really inspiring for me to learn about you was your involvement with Boys and Girls Club over the years. And your little sibling.
So Big Brothers Big Sisters, Alex is my little, and he is now 24, and we met when he was 8, and so just really crazy life experience for him, and he was the first one in his family to graduate from high school. And he's now in a construction trade program.
Awesome.
I know, I'm so excited. So that really also, I deeply believe in mentorship, and that we can't expect things of people when they haven't seen a path forward for themselves. And so I think, again, that is one of the themes of my belief in the work that we're trying to come together on, is just providing that opportunity for individuals so that they can see themselves in whatever way they would like to see themselves.
Yeah.
And in this case, Alex is just such a kind, wonderful, motivated human being. I've learned so much from him. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
So your run for Port Commissioner was very interesting because I feel like you really led that campaign with this, I would call it like a core value or like an anchor of the campaign, that you wanted to bring together voices that might not see eye to eye and find common ground. And so I guess I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how was that on the campaign? And then how has it now been realized or not since being elected?
It was surprising because I think of myself as being a courageous person and a leader, and I've always kind of stuck up for the underdog. And standing in the middle in politics was scary, and it was very lonely. Yeah. And so I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate where the criticism would be coming from. It was people that maybe I thought would be advocates, and I didn't even know them, and they were saying negative things about me. Yeah. Or, it's much, I watched some of the other people that were running who were more moderate, I guess, for lack of a better word, or didn't fit into one box or the other, kind of get pulled in a direction, because otherwise you really are just standing alone. And so I had to continue to kind of give myself these pep talks of like, okay, no, this is what I believe in. Like, I don't want to be one way or the other. I really, and back to the traveling thing, my opinion is just like, the root of it is having a diversity of opinions at the table is how we create a more just society. And like, that's not just something I read in a book. It's like, when you go to places where you've seen genocide, you see how right now I might agree with the way things are going, but it always flips, right? Yeah. And if we don't really not just honor, but like seek that diversity of opinion, it crumbles. And that's what this whole country was founded on, was fleeing tyranny. And so I just had to continue to remind myself of that. And it got easier. At first I would go to these groups where I knew a lot of people didn't like me, and I'd be like, hi. And I think to some extent, some people you build a relationship with, other people you don't, and that's okay. But being authentic to myself, because that is, like you said, my core value, how that's extended into like being in office, I think it just makes it easier to listen to and incorporate different opinions. So if somebody's like, I hate this, and somebody else is like, I love this, I think both of those are really helpful. Yeah. Rather than wanting to align with one direction or another, I think when you are actually listening, you can then create better policy that reflects the whole community. I think there's one of your questions later on where we can talk about just what that looks like as a 3-person commissioner making these decisions, taking a collaborative approach.
Yeah, will you just talk, because I think that for a lot of people, local politics can in general sort of feel like a mystery, but I feel like especially with Port of Olympia, I know even as somebody like myself who's super, for many years now been really engaged in city council and county commission and figuring out how all of those systems really work, the port still feels like, what is it? Like, you're like, what are they? How does it function? What do they actually oversee and all of that? And so would you talk just a little bit generally about what do you see as the role of the port in the community?
Totally. So part of what's really cool about the port is they have taxing authority, and they also they generate revenues in the private sector. So it's our executive director calls it a platypus, so it can walk on land and in water. And so that's unique. Our mission is very narrow. We're not a general governing body. So our sole purpose is economic development. Okay. And so I think sometimes that's important for us to recenter on, and also in partnering with the community, recentering on our mission, because we don't do everything. The city of Olympia or the county or the city of Tumwater, these different jurisdictions, they have to wear a lot more hats. Our scope is pretty narrow. I think that this whole cloak of secrecy thing, we just haven't done a good job of communicating and learning about other organizations and how we might be of service or have similar goals. Again, I'm maybe jumping ahead in your questions, but as far as it pertains to coming up with solutions for housing instability and insecurity, we are coming to the table for the first time, maybe not the first time, but in a meaningful way. More. And sometimes it'll be appropriate for us to partner on solutions to problems. Sometimes it won't. But if we can be in better conversation with our jurisdictional partners, community leaders like yourself, so that we even know what we could be of service doing. So the port has, back to your original question, we have the airport, the marine terminal, which is what people associate with the port typically, Swantown Marina, which is where the boats are moored, and then we have commercial real estate. And so those are the different business arms, and they all function as separate business units but together. And then we kind of walk this back to the platypus, mission versus margin. So being of service to the community, public access, environmental remediation, and stewardship, combined with making a profit and being a springboard for economic opportunities. So that's kind of the structure. And then
so is it, sorry to interrupt,
please.
So is it like a quasi-governmental body or is it like...
That's how it feels to me, because, and it is like a chartered governmental, because we have taxing authority, we fall under the RCWs, and we, that's where the authority of the port is listed. But because of this ability to generate revenue, it's unique.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. So... yeah, talk about so that's kind of the overarching structure, and then there's 3 elected positions.
So there's 3 commissioners, there's 3 different districts, it's all Thurston County, so that's another misconception because it's Port of Olympia, it's actually the Port of Thurston County.
Okay.
And we will most likely be moving to 5 commissioners along with the county when the county moves to 5 commissioners.
Oh, cool.
So that's...
And is that predominantly because of population growth or...
Yep.
Okay.
It's because once we hit 300,000 residents, we have the option, and with a 3-person commission with the Open Public Meetings Act, you cannot speak to another commissioner outside of a public meeting.
Right.
So it's like so cumbersome. I can't be like, Meg, when you said that, and like, I didn't understand that. Like, you're like, Meg, I would like to make a motion. It's just a very rigid, you can't like actually noodle on stuff and come up with creative solutions. So having 5 will allow us to have more conversation.
Would it still be districted?
So that's part of the conversation, is just making sure there's representation and how that happens. So there's some discussion about at-large positions, there's some discussion about districting, and with redistricting, there comes politics. So I would like to assume positive intent and assume that we all just want adequate representation for the different, whether it's South County, whether it's, and so that process will be managed. I believe Carolina Mejia will be the chair of the county commissioners at that time, and then our chair, I'm not exactly sure how that works procedurally, but...
So is it within like a year or 2 that the commission structure will change for the county and the port?
So April we'll get the red light, green light of whether or not we have the 300,000 population, and that comes from the state. And then if we get the green light that we do have 300,000, then it would be like go. The port and the
April, like next month, April.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
The port and the county already signed this kind of we want to work together declaration. And then they would get rolling on the redistricting process and how that's going to look. So I believe that's Carolina and Bob IL, our chairperson. And then they would work through that, and then it would be on the ballot for 2023. So you would have, so it could move pretty quickly.
Wow.
If we don't hit the population number, then it would just be delayed. But it's kind of a if not, or when not if.
Yeah.
So
working on the 3-person commission, and then you can't talk to each other outside of meetings. So how have you navigated, like, because I feel like so much of diverse conversations, I mean, I think you said the word noodling, which is a really good one, but it's like, it's really kind of has to be an organic process to some degree. So have you found it challenging to, like, how is it working with your seatmates to talk about some of these issues that are coming in front of the port?
I think there's two things. One, and you deal with this all the time in your work, is the access to our processes is somewhat homogenous. So the people that are showing up at our meetings, or who they understand the system and they have access to us, they provide very thoughtful written comment or verbal comment, but how do we expand that to give more access to more of the community? Mm-hmm. So I think that that's part of what all three of us as commissioners have really, I think, are and continue to try and take steps to provide more transparent. So we're not this secret port organization. We're providing more transparency of what we're doing, mm-hmm. and then engaging with a more diverse group of people. Mm-hmm. And then as far as one of the things that we've said is just being able to have civil discussion in our meetings, because it can only be in this public format, being willing to make a mistake or change your mind, mm-hmm. And having that vulnerability and trust piece, mm-hmm. that the three of us really are trying to work together to incorporate what we're hearing from the community at large. Yeah. And we're still getting there because we're new, but I think we're doing a good job. I really feel like both Commissioner Ayal and Commissioner Downing have a similar intent of reflecting what they hear from the community, mm-hmm. creating good policy that's not reactive to any one particular group or mm-hmm. interest. For instance, last night we voted on the Oyo Hotel, and and so there was a lot of thoughtful public comment about that, and you could tell that there was, and I would say...
Can you just give like a little overview for people who might not know about what's going on with that?
So the port owns land, and then they lease the land to a property owner who would own the building. So in Tumwater, just off of I-5, off of, is that Tumwater Boulevard?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so.
It's called Oyo Hotel, that has been looked at for affordable housing for seniors. Mm-hmm. And there's some complications because that property, the FAA essentially gave it to the port and said, you can use it, but you have to follow our rules. Okay. And so they can kind of tell us what we can do. It's pretty limited in what we can do. And so there was a holdup as far as the port making anything happen there last year. I don't think it was ill-intended. I think it was just trying to make sure that it was viable. Mm-hmm. But it became very clear that we needed to move forward and do what we could to be a part of solutions for housing insecurity and instability. Yeah. And my comment last night was, our core mission is creating economic opportunities. And I feel like addressing barriers for people so that our economy can be healthy for all individuals in our county very much falls in line with our mission. So I don't have to get outside of our mission to make an argument that participating in creating housing solutions is important. Yeah. And I think that is shared by my fellow commissioners. One thing I want to make clear is we speak as a whole, the three of us as a governing body, as commissioners. Today I'm kind of wearing two hats, Amy Evans' hat and port commissioner, but I would never want to speak on behalf of all three of us in any way. But I think we all express that we really want to do what we can to see if we can come to the table to be a part of that. So what we voted for last night was to authorize the spending of the money on the first step of, we don't know whether the FAA will let us do it, but we at least have to try.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then the intention there would be that the housing authority would essentially convert the Oyo Hotel into affordable units predominantly for seniors, correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah. And the FAA has said that we cannot lease the land for that purpose, so we would actually have to sell the property outright, which is something that we really don't do very often. Yeah. So that was another sort of layer, but again, everyone's intent is being more of a community partner when we can. And I think we were all in agreement that we can in this case, at least at this stage. There's still unknowns with the FAA. There's some complications with the hotel is owned by someone else. We don't have control. Right. But we're doing all we can.
Okay, so that's really cool. And I guess what I'm thinking of is going back to kind of what you were saying about creating more transparency, bringing more voices to the table. I think part of that is like people feeling like there's a reason why they should show up at the table. And so I guess I'm like, why
do you care?
Why should people care? Why should people in Thurston County care about what the port's up to? Like how do you see the port actually like impacting people's daily lives?
You mean you're not bringing a cargo ship with me? So as I continue to learn more about how the port operates, I think the biggest reason that people should care is it touches on a number of things that we've talked about. We have a narrow scope, and we have multiple revenue streams, and we can be pretty nimble. We're not this big, huge port. We're like a small, medium-sized port, and our charter is creating economic opportunities. And so if there was an area of the community, there's some talk right now with the city of Olympia of doing a workforce training center. How cool is that? I mean, why should I care as a citizen? Because then you might have job training. Then you might have a job. That didn't exist before. If we're going to create a tourist amenity that then you own a restaurant and someone's going to come eat at your restaurant, you want that tourist amenity that's going to drive people to your restaurant. You like history. We're doing a project with a historic tugboat and an interpretive trail. So I think that one of the things the port can do better is communicate what we already are doing, but also just directing ourselves outward and hearing, well, what is important to you? And I think the biggest takeaway for people of like, why should I care? Is I think we're at this really cool moment in time where, well, tell us what you think we can do. You know, do you want to see, there's the, what is the food hub down in Tenino called? Oh, Aslan's going to kill me that I can't say the name of it. But we're doing this really cool stuff with food production down in South County, which is going to make it easier for people who are in that world to do their work. It's going to create opportunities for people. Maybe there's something like that with crafting or something I've never even heard of.
Right.
And I think that with the tone of the commission right now, with where we're at coming out of COVID and just sort of this fresh, let's just call it spring, right? Like, tell us what you want. And if it has to do with creating economic opportunities, then let's figure it out. And whether it's working with our jurisdictional partners, there's some capital in the system right now that's to be spent on revitalizing and creating more resilient businesses and people, and so
there's kind of opportunity for big ideas that could be.
Don't you feel like?
Like
I feel that's a great way of saying it. There's the opportunity for big ideas. And I mean, speaking for myself, I'm kind of have a cheer like let's go personality. But I think Bob and Joe and Sam, our executive director, and our whole team, I think we're just excited about, well, what do people really want? Well, let's do that. And it might not be the one thing that Meg Martin wants, but if we incorporate, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about working with you, is that recognition that it's not all of one thing that one person wants. That's not good governance. It's representing the diversity of our community. Some people think cargo ships are the coolest thing ever. Some people don't. Some people think that kayaks are the coolest thing ever. Some people don't. Okay, well, let's have some of both. And also let's, the marine terminal serves a very important emergency preparedness aspect from an earthquake, natural disaster standpoint. Let's recognize that. Let's celebrate that. If we have a catastrophic event where I-5 is closed, we're going to be glad we have a marine terminal. And so just things like that. Everything's more nuanced, the work that you do. When you look for understanding, then there's so much more opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. How would you recommend people, like, what's the best way for people, like, if folks do have a big idea out there, or is it public comment? Is it emailing? Like, getting a meeting with one of you? Like, how would you recommend would be the best way for community members to engage?
Well, just because I'm here, you can email Amy E, AMYE, @portolympia.com. You can also email all of the commissioners@portolympia.com. You can go to our website. We recognize that we want to improve our outward-facing conversations with the community, and I think you'll continue to see that getting better. This is an awesome opportunity. Before we started filming, we were talking about like the park should do something like this, and how do we get out? But public comment is great. If you want to come to our meetings, you have the opportunity for public comment at the beginning, so you don't have to stand through the whole meeting if you don't want.
That's nice.
It is.
Bless you. Yeah.
Well, I think that's sometimes part of what's intimidating. It's like, I don't have 2 hours to go spend on a public meeting. I care, but I have children or a job so I think, and that's one thing I've learned is just how important access is. And how we have to rethink what that looks like. I had someone want to schedule a meeting with me at 8 p.m. the other day, and I recognized my reaction was like, oh, well, nobody schedules meetings at 8 p.m. And I recognized like that's because I'm meeting with the same types of people.
Yeah.
And like, let's figure out a time, just opening our brain. So if you have feedback about that, I don't know that we're gonna have success changing the commission time meeting. Yeah. But we certainly can create outreach opportunities that are more accommodating to people. Yeah. We can, I think that this is a little bit of an aside, but through all of the attention that we're long overdue paying to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. It's just reminded me of things I never even thought as being barriers. And so, and just
like times of meetings
and why would you come to me and have any trust that I was going to care what you were going to say? And I will just say, and Meg hopefully will vouch for me that I really do care. And I think Bob and Joe really care too. Yeah. And so it's a unique opportunity of, if you've been hesitant to participate or you think your voice doesn't matter, it really does. And I respond to every email I get. I hope I can keep that commitment. If I get 500 emails in one day, it might take me a little while, but just knowing that we want to implement with the ideas of the community. And the port has done a really good job of that with Destination Waterfront was a really cool public process about what people wanted to see at the waterfront. Vision 2050, similar. But you don't have to only participate in those processes to have your voice be heard. And if you tell us what you want, we might be able to do it.
Well, and I think that that's what I always tell people about engaging in local politics, especially in a small to medium-sized community like ours, is that, I had never, in 10,000 years would have thought that we could have, done all the things that we've done in 7 years for housing and homelessness in the community. And a lot of that was just continuing to show up, continuing to be there, and being able to listen to the feedback that we were receiving and pivot when we needed to. And I think that all things told, I've been really surprised at the amount of yeses that we've gotten, and I think that that's something that's really special about where we're at and the time that we're in. Totally. And I think I'm curious because you are such a positive person, and it's something I really and such a we got this, we can do this kind of, and I love that. And I am curious, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing our community right now? What worries you or keeps you up at night at times?
Well, I think it's more of it spans beyond our community, just the division and the divisiveness and the us versus them. And I think sometimes when I talk about my perspective from a global perspective, it sounds obtuse, but I really believe that if I blame you for my problems, we are both worse off. Yeah. And it ends in violence typically. Yeah. And not to be too, that's where I'm not positive. I'm well, if we keep blaming each other, then that's what we're going to create, is a community where we're just hurting each other. And it doesn't necessarily keep me up at night in the sense of, if that's where we're at, I'm going to do everything I can to move the needle the other direction. But if you look at the tide of human history, this is kind of what we do. We blame each other, and then we rejoin on some level, and then we blame each other, and we rejoin on some level. And I'm hopeful that we will have some perspective based on, COVID seems to have created more division than unity. The Ukraine, it does seem like there's some perspective there, but that division is not isolated to global geopolitics or national politics. We feel it in our community here. I felt it, just attacks towards me personally. And that doesn't make people want to get involved in politics.
Right.
And our system was constructed, being a port commissioner is a part-time job. I have a job, I have to pay my rent still, and, mortgage, to be clear, I do own a home. But I think that that's the whole idea, is that you get citizens involved in governing, and you create a government that's more representative of its citizens. And I think we've forgotten that to some extent. Politicians are just people. And if we want things to change,
especially locally.
Especially locally.
That's really true, yeah.
Yeah, and the large majority of people really, even if they think about things differently, they want to try and do what's best. So I think that division is the biggest threat. I think also just leadership and culture. People are, not to bring up Will Smith at the Oscars again,
but everybody's doing it.
But people are like vibrating at this level, right? Where everyone's kind of like ready to fight. Like there's more road rage. There's just all
domestic violence.
There's more domestic violence. Just everyone's kind of mad, and they want to punch somebody. And so that just is gonna. And that's what we're working on internally at the port, externally at the port, is like, how do we create the leadership so that we can have this foundation that gives people a safe place to just kind of. And it's no different than the work that you do. When somebody has a safe place where they can just. I can like feel my own like body change just in the one breath that I took. And it hurts my heart to think about people not having anywhere that they feel that way. But then you think about that over and over in the community because you're afraid of COVID, at your work because you're afraid, and you just have all these people that are vibrating at this really intense level right now that it's a threat and an opportunity, like everything. I'll Pollyanna it and be, and be like, I think it's an opportunity to reset. But the port commissioners need to set that tone, and we need to provide a safe place for our executive director. We need to provide a safe place for our staff, and we need to give them clear direction so that we can all row together. And if we do that, I think we'll be successful. And if we continue having community conversations, we'll continue to bring people instead of having this whole group of people who hate the port, we will have a few converts. And you're already starting to feel the tone of our meetings change. Because if somebody hits you and you don't hit back, you can then build rapport. And that was something I learned in my campaign. If you put yourself in a position to be in politics, you're going to take some shots. That's your job. But if you get defensive, that's not going to help anybody.
Right.
So if you can just continuing to listen and listen for understanding, not just listen to prove your point. Because we're all kind of saying the same thing. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we can be healthy. And maybe we believe, you and I are a great example. We believe how you get there is different, but we have very much fundamentally the same goal. Like,
Yeah.
we both have these hearts to, like, want to help people. I might think that we should go about it this way, and you might think that we should go about it that way, and that's great. Because then we'll create a policy that does both.
Yeah, and I think so much, I just had this, not to go, like, too far on a tangent, but I just was on a trip with a family and was able to talk with a person who is, like, you might think would be, like, diametrically politically opposed to my position. And it was this fascinating conversation because literally, like, everything that he said that was the problem, I was like, yeah, like, yeah, income inequality is a huge issue. Like, yeah, people can't afford their basic needs on less than $20 an hour. Like, yeah, like, I was like, this is blowing my mind right now that we literally agree on so many different things. But then, like, the second that it got into what do we do,
Right.
we didn't have the trust, we didn't have
Right.
the rapport, we didn't have the I mean, honestly, like, the mutual respect I think that it takes to be able to be like, here's why I think. It reminded me of the time where we, like, locked on maybe, like, a universal income is something that could be, like, a Venn diagram agreement of where we're at. And I was like, oh, and you were like, oh. We're like, wait. But I think that it just takes so much willingness to set aside ego and willingness to have self reflection. And I feel like that's so hard to do, especially in a time where, how you put it so well, like, everybody's vibrating at this place of brink of chaos at all times, and it's not a, like, very self reflective or calm place to try to grow from. So I don't know.
Yeah, and how do we continue to lead and, like, and in many cases, like, my lesson right now is sit down too in certain areas. Like, how do we continue to dialogue when we have some basic needs that are not being unmet? And and again, I mean, that wasn't meant to be a direct reference to the work that you do, but how do we expect people to function when their basic needs aren't being met? And I think that just extends to everyone right now.
Yeah, totally.
And so, and the ego part, I mean, it's so vital. And to be able to set your ego aside, you have to know that that's where you're functioning from. You have to know that you have to have the vulnerability piece of, I don't need to be right. I mean, I've gone to a lot of counseling. You can either be right or you can be happy. Or also, my favorite, the hardest time not to be right is when you are.
Yeah.
But I think and we've talked about this, but it's just these relationships. Like, people, I think there's this sense that you're one person, but so is everything. Putin is one person. Truly. Like, yes, he now has some people that are following him. He's one dude.
Yeah.
Like, we have a lot of influence as individuals, and our relationships with other people can create additional spheres. And just how do we create hope? You know, I think that once you've given up, and I think that's where some of the political fracturing is there's just this, you're so far over here that I'm never gonna. And to your point, you found a lot of areas of agreement. So if you would have had more time to build trust with this person, you might be able to find areas of agreement on solutions. Right. And it might not live on your extreme or their extreme of what you think is best, but there might be agreement on, you know, some policies forward. So let's start with those. Yeah. Let's try.
Yeah, totally. Well, with that, I mean, what is giving, you mentioned a little bit about, like, the time that we're in coming into spring and big ideas and whatever, you know, but I'm like, what does give you hope what are you looking forward to for
Mm-hmm.
like the next foreseeable future in Olympia and in Thurston County?
I just feel like it's a really cool place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so eclectic and creative, and there's Warehouser, and there's Lamplighter. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say Lighthouse. There's just such a diversity of places here and people here, and if we can use what I'm excited about is using my interest in human beings
Mm-hmm.
in this current realm of politics to connect some of the dots in a different way than I have before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's me personally. What I'm excited for as far as serving on the port is I think I can bring that to the table of like, hey Meg, we're thinking about this, and we have enough rapport that you can give me your feedback. Or Bob, being a tribal member. How cool is that to have a tribal member working on your tribal land acknowledgement or honor statement?
Yeah.
Not just me trying to talk to a bunch of people. Like, again, it goes back to representation and access.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we are thoughtful about bringing people in rather than casting people out, and that's a really broad, that's my belief system, as you know, overall, regardless of how much I disagree with you, casting you out isn't going to help us solve the problem.
Yeah.
And I think as we continue to move forward, that's a real opportunity because we have more of an awareness now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also used that awareness to cast people out. And how do we shift that? And that gives me hope. That's kind of the two sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can, and if we do, then we'll have great success. And more people will have a more healthy community to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't, then we'll probably have to live in this for a while.
Yeah.
And that's up to all of us.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I've learned, you can only control yourself. So I don't know what the outcome will be. I don't know where our community will stand up. I think that's one of the things that's been inspiring about Ukrainian people is just the unity that they've shown and pride of country, and how do we find something that we as Thurston County residents can have that sense of unity around? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we certainly figure out what our differences are, but
yeah.
How do we celebrate how our shared vision, I guess. And again, we don't need to agree on everything, but I think most people want a healthy, safe,
Mm-hmm.
Flourishing place to be. And that looks different for everyone, and that comes back to the outcomes, but
yeah. And like, how do we find that unity without like having things have to descend into tragedy to like get there? And I think that that's like one of, I joke a lot over the years of like how kind of, obviously there's a ton of people who, clearly I see it every single day, but it's like there's a ton of people who are like very legitimately suffering in our community on a daily basis. And there's a lot of privilege and stability here as well. And I think that this kind of fascinating thing has happened with our new building that we opened in December, is that our shelter guests who are there are by far the most stable I have ever seen them. And it's like, oh, surprise, when you have showers, laundry, you're not getting kicked out at 7 a.m. Your mental health like really improves. But what has also happened is that it's created space for our employees who have been working through the entire pandemic with no break, working harder than maybe even before the pandemic, to struggle a little bit. There's like this space now for them to be able to be like, wait a second, what about this? Or why is this like this? Or how? And so it's been this very interesting moment in our organization, and I'm like, that thing where you are moving from crisis into like stability, like how do you find, it's a lot easier at times to find unity in a crisis
Totally.
than it is when things are more stable. And so I'm like, that to me is, I hope that we don't, I don't know, I hope that we can find ways to work together and
without needing to be in crisis.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said we don't need unity or purity, we need teamwork. And that also like really resonated with me, of like, if we try and agree on everything, then we're gonna get stuck. But we just need to, again, let's row in the same direction. And maybe that's part of it, you know, maybe it's when you're comfortable, you are trying to find agreement on every little thing, and when you're in crisis, the basic things rise to the surface and you find agreement around them. We don't want people shooting at us. Okay, we agree. Well, I don't know if your vacation leave policy is good. You know, like, no, we have different opinions. You know, like, I don't know. Maybe it's back to finding alignment. Like, what can you find alignment on when you're comfortable? Because we humans seem to like problems, you know. If we don't have one, we create one. Totally. I talked to my friend about that, who does eating disorder counseling, and I'm like, do eating disorders exist in like third world countries or places? And she's like, no, you know, like, so the actual disease doesn't exist. And I'm like, that's crazy, right? It's like it blew my mind, kind of like, and how sad, you know. It's just like, so just how do we support ourselves with all of our privilege, because it has its own challenges. And how do we be, that's one of my other realizations, is when people are in suffering yourself isn't helping that person. And that was like my 20s, you know. I think we've actually talked about this, but just like the guilt of being privileged, and just like, well, if I suffer, it'll somehow be honoring this person's suffering. And it's like, no, like, get out there and do something. Like, lucky us, we were born in America with food, and, well, you know, many of us, not all of us, but better off than a lot of places. So how are we going to make it better for more people? And especially with the, you know, with the division, and some people doing well and some people not, and it's an exciting time to be a leader, Meg. I just think it all comes back to people. People and trust.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else that you would want the community to know about yourself or the port, or any of the work that's happening there?
No, I think that the biggest thing is, and I can't speak for all of the jurisdictions, but my experience with all of the jurisdictions as well as the port is the majority of people really do want to hear what the community has to say. So if there are ways we can improve that process, otherwise just send an email. You can shoot me a text if you want, like, whatever. And just knowing that there is this, it's a time for big ideas right now. And you can have different ideas and be friends. I mean, actually, that's probably the biggest takeaway of, like, there's probably people who will watch this and be like, Meg and Amy are friends? Like, you know? Yes! I love Meg!
Same.
And I feel like I've had the opportunity to advocate for interfaith works and you because of my personal relationship with you and my trust of you through my work on different boards and things, that I wouldn't have, if we didn't have that relationship, that wouldn't have been able to happen. And it's just all about the relationship piece.
Because when we don't actually get to see each other in action in real time, we fill in the blanks of what our assumptions are. And and I would say that that's very true for me as well. And so I try to challenge that in myself and just ask myself, you know, like what blanks am I trying to fill in here with the way that I think things are and the assumptions that I'm making. And I think for me, you know, we ask so much of what we do is try to challenge assumptions or narratives that are not necessarily based in reality for the people that are living unhoused in our community. And it's like, I think I had a real aha moment a few years ago with my friend Malika Lamont, where we were like, if we're actually harm reductionists, if we're actually trying to live our values of trauma-informed care and meeting people where they're at, regardless of their circumstances, it needs to be regardless of their circumstances. Right. It needs to be people in positions of power. It needs to be people who, you know, and I think that was a real shift for me. And so thanks for being a part of that shift and for being here today.
When people say I'm a horrible capitalist or something, you can tell them I'm nice too.
Great style.
Always looking good. Everyone likes leopard pants, right? I was noticing your socks kind of match your shirt.
Yeah, I got
and then you have your bedazzling. This is what's fun about. It's just fun.
Yeah.
And that's where having the perspective of like there's nothing wrong with having problems to solve. It's just what we do. Like that's what humans do. So
totally.
Have a good time with it. Hang out with people.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So fun.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Hey guys.
If you know folks that missed this episode, you can always share it once it's up on our website at interfaith-works.org or our YouTube channel, Interfaith Works Thurston County. Please stay tuned because after hearing a lot of feedback from some of our viewers, we are going to be starting to post episodes on a podcast format pretty soon. So if you're anything like me and listening to podcasts whenever you're cleaning the house or whatever, you'll be able to tune in for Lean in Olympia. Thank you so much, Amy, for your time. I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah.
This week, actually tomorrow, we are finishing leasing up all of the apartments at Unity Commons. So we're going to be at just about 100% leased up.
Yay.
And so next month for my Lean in Olympia, I'm hoping to interview some of the new residents there. So be sure to stay tuned to that because it's like an unbelievable amount of just beautiful, triumphant, amazing people and stories who are all living in that building right now. And so really want to make sure that the community gets to hear from folks. We can't do this work without our entire community. We're so grateful for everybody. And I haven't done a Lean In so long, and it feels really good to be back. So
love it.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
See y'all later.
Bye, guys.